10 years ago, I saved my childhood friend Ethan from a fire, but in doing so, I suffered permanent hearing loss in one ear. Later, my parents passed away one after the other. Seeing my feelings for Ethan, my grandmother persuaded him to marry me, believing it would be a way for him to repay me. But when I was kidnapped and the abductors demanded a ransom, Ethan coldly said without hesitation, "I can't marry the one I truly love because I owe you." He added, "Why do you keep pretending? Aren't you tired of this?" In the end, the kidnappers beat me to death. But when I opened my eyes, I found myself back on the day of the fire. This time, I didn't rush to save Ethan. Instead, I called an ambulance out of duty. After being discharged from the hospital, Ethan grabbed my hand, his eyes red, and asked why I hadn't saved him. I bitterly laughed, realizing that being a fool at least once was enough. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through me, and when I opened my eyes again, I was surrounded by raging flames. Was this hell? I gave a bitter laugh. Death didn't seem so terrible if it meant I wouldn't have to live such a miserable life anymore. A familiar voice called me from the fire. "Rachel, please save me." I froze. Hadn't I lost my hearing saving Ethan before? Then I realized how familiar this scene was. My heart raced. I had really gone back 10 years, to before everything happened. Ethan called again. "Rachel, my leg is stuck. Come help me." I turned away, ready to leave. In my past life, I had loved Ethan since childhood. Despite knowing how dangerous it was, I still rushed to save him, and in return, I lost my hearing and had to give up my studies and my love for music. I invested everything in him. After my parents died, my grandmother persuaded him to marry me out of gratitude. At the time, I was thrilled, thinking we would finally be together, but marrying Ethan was like falling into an abyss. He loved someone else but married me anyway. He used his gratitude as an excuse and exploited me to write music for his true love, Emily. He deceived me, saying that since I couldn't hear, it would be better for Emily to arrange the music under my name so that the works wouldn't go unnoticed. I believed him until Emily became famous, and I found out she was the one Ethan had always loved. When I spoke to him, he blamed me for taking Emily's place and treated me with cold indifference. He said I should be grateful, even though I had been kidnapped and the abductors demanded a ransom. During a video call, I desperately begged for help while the kidnappers stood behind me. Meanwhile, Ethan was attending a ball with Emily, her arm draped around his shoulder. He frowned and coldly said, "Because I owe you, I can't marry the one I truly love. Why do you keep behaving like this? Aren't you tired of it?" To communicate better, I had learned to read lips. The kidnappers, angry at the lack of ransom, beat me to death. Reflecting on my past life filled me with rage. My deafness was because of him. He didn't want to repay me but kept pretending. Why give me hope only to destroy it? "Rachel, don't leave. Please save me. If you leave, I'll die," Ethan screamed from the flames. This place was remote, and if I hadn't known Ethan was here, I wouldn't have come. I also knew this was a secret place for Ethan and Emily. If I left, Ethan would certainly die. What an annoying bastard. If I weren't afraid his ghost would haunt me, I wouldn't save him at all. Out of duty, I cursed under my breath and called the fire department. What if the fire spread and threatened nearby houses? I was no longer willing to risk my life for such an ungrateful person. On my way home, I realized how wonderful it was to hear sounds again. When I reached the lower floor of my house, I heard hurried footsteps coming from the stairs. I heard something had happened to Ethan from the Carter family. "Rachel always follows him, but she doesn't even answer the phone," someone said. Listening to their voices, my eyes slowly filled with tears. It felt like the last time I heard my parents' voices was in another life. My father quickly spat, trying to dispel the ominous words, his voice full of worry. "Rachel, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling with concern. I quickened my pace and called out, "Dad." "Mom, it's okay." "Oh, you little troublemaker," my mom scolded. Her voice was sharp but full of love. "You scared me half to death. Why didn't you answer the phone? Do you want to give me a heart attack?" She poked me in the forehead, but her scolding now seemed so sweet to me. "Everything will be fine as long as Rachel is safe," my father said, his voice a mix of relief and reproach. "Rachel, next time, please answer the phone," he instructed. My nose tightened, and I couldn't hold back my tears. I rushed into my mom's arms, pressing against her and sobbing loudly. Dad. Mom. I missed you so much. I won't put my phone on silent anymore. And I won't think about Ethan anymore. I just want to be with both of you. In my past life, after my parents passed away, I was consumed with regret. I wondered, if I had paid more attention to them, would I have noticed their illnesses sooner? Would they have lived longer? What's wrong with this child? Did someone at school bully you? Or did that Carter kid insult you? My mom mumbled in confusion, rubbing my back and instinctively trying to comfort me. After I entered high school, I became more rebellious, constantly irritated by their concern. Now, I couldn't believe I found comfort in their voices. My mom probably thought I had gone through some huge grievance. I didn't explain, just buried my head in her embrace and cried until my eyes were swollen. Then I raised my head and said, "Mom, Dad, we need to go to the hospital for a checkup. I dreamt you were sick and I'm scared." I dragged them toward the hospital without waiting for their response. Perhaps my pitiful tears moved them because they just sighed and let me pull them along without protesting. At the hospital, they underwent all possible tests, and some results would be ready that same day. While we were waiting, we unexpectedly ran into the neighbor grandmother. She came up to me, wiping tears, and said, "Rachel, you came to visit Ethan too, didn't you? Don't just stand here, come inside." Without waiting for my answer, she led me inside. "Rachel, you came to visit Ethan too, didn't you?" said the elderly neighbor. "Well, what are you standing there for? Come in." Without waiting for my response, she pulled me into the hospital room. In my past life, this kind old woman had always treated me well, and I simply couldn't refuse her. However, the moment I stepped inside, a red apple came flying at me. "Get out! I don't want to see her. Take her away!" Ethan shouted furiously. He was lying in bed, his head wrapped in thick bandages. Without my interference this time, his injuries were far more severe. "Rachel came to visit you," his grandmother scolded, her voice trembling with emotion. "How can you say that? Do you even realize that without her, you might not have survived at all?" Ethan glared at me with pure hatred. "Grandma, all she did was call emergency services. That's the bare minimum she should have done," he snapped, then narrowed his eyes and sneered. "Rachel, this time you didn't go deaf, so you're not going to force me to marry you, are you?" I froze, feeling my heart clench. He remembered too. He knew I had been reborn. I looked at his bandaged body and felt relieved. In this life, all I had done was call for help, which meant all the pain and consequences fell solely on him. With a cheerful smile, I bid him and his grandmother farewell. As soon as I stepped out of the room, I met my parents' eyes. They clearly suspected something. "I really don't love him anymore," I muttered in defense. "Besides, you should see his face now. It's all burned so ugly." Unconsciously, my voice grew louder, and a furious roar erupted from the hospital room, followed by the sound of something shattering. My parents quickly ushered me away, their faces a mix of frustration and awkwardness. This time, I wasn't the one who suffered, so I was able to continue my studies as usual. The lively chatter of classmates, the bustle of school hallways, it all felt so distant. I hadn't experienced normal life in so long. Following my memories, I headed to class. In my past life, my obsession with Ethan had led to a falling out with my only friend, Lisa. Shortly after that, the fire happened. I lost my hearing, dropped out of school, and eventually married Ethan. My feelings of inferiority due to my disability, combined with his coldness, caused me to cut off all ties with my friends. This time, I wasn't going to sacrifice my friendship for him. Determined to fix things, I immediately went looking for Lisa. "Lisa!" I called out, but she walked past me as if she hadn't seen me. I froze, a painful sting in my chest. Someone deliberately bumped into me, but I didn't react. Soon, a mocking voice rang out. "Oh, look who it is, the ever-loyal puppy of Ethan." Emily drawled sarcastically. She was the girl Ethan had loved in our past life. "He's in the hospital, and you're not running to him? Is your heart breaking from grief? Maybe I should call him? He'll definitely listen to me." Her friend laughed maliciously. I looked at them calmly. "Well, I wish you both happiness and many years together," I replied with a smile, refusing to get dragged into their performance. Remembering the upcoming music competition, I decided that this time, I wouldn't let Emily steal my compositions. As I walked to my seat, a sharp pain suddenly pierced my scalp. Did I say you could leave? Emily hissed, yanking my hair. Before I could react, the grip loosened. Rachel, are you out of your mind? You argue with me, but give up immediately in front of Emily. Lisa suddenly intervened, looking at me as if I had disappointed her. Emily paled with anger. Lisa, are you against me? Do you want my father to kick you out of this school? Go ahead, try, Lisa smirked. Do you even realize you live in a civilized world? There are cameras everywhere. You think you can do whatever you want? Exactly, I added, playing along. And with all these witnesses, you're the one who started the conflict. Judging by your words, your father must be involved in something shady. No, what are you talking about? Lisa gasped, pretending to be shocked. Rachel, we just uncovered a school conspiracy. We complemented each other perfectly, while Emily could only tremble with rage. You'll both regret this, she screamed before storming off. I looked at Lisa guiltily. Don't listen to her nonsense. You're my best friend. I was just an idiot before. Lisa rolled her eyes but smirked. Remember that. We reconciled as if nothing had happened. Before class began, Lisa suddenly looked at me seriously. If you really want to make things right, I have one condition. What is it? Protect your songs. And never share them with Ethan. The bell rang, and I quickly nodded, happy to have a chance to restore our friendship. Soon, my parents' medical test results arrived. Thankfully, they only had minor health issues that could be treated. A huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Lisa helped me sign up for the school's vocal competition. It was more of a fun event, but the judges often scouted students for prestigious music schools. The problem was that my rebirth had happened in my final year of school. In my past life, I had wasted it chasing after Ethan, and now, catching up academically was impossible. So I decided to take a risk and try to win the competition. Why can't I participate in the competition? I asked the teacher after hearing that my application had been rejected. Perhaps it was because the school had close ties with musical institutions and placed special importance on vocal talent alongside academic success. My singing abilities had always been exceptional. However, my homeroom teacher looked concerned. Rachel, he began hesitantly. I know you're talented, but this year the school has introduced new rules. It's not just about showcasing your skills anymore. You also need to demonstrate good behavior. Unfortunately, you've had absences and disciplinary violations. I wasn't going to accept this decision without a fight and tried to argue. But then I noticed Emily sitting by the teacher's desk. She had her arms crossed and was smirking smugly. Lisa, ready to stand up for me, took a step forward, but I stopped her and simply walked out of the room. As we passed Emily, she whispered condescendingly. That's what happens when you cross me. At that moment, it became clear. She had somehow influenced the situation. Lisa clenched her fists. Rachel, don't worry. We'll file a complaint with the education committee. But I knew the outcome wouldn't change. My absences and violations were real. When we returned to class, Emily was already organizing a group to visit Ethan in the hospital. She made a point of emphasizing that refusing to participate would mean a lack of team spirit. I rolled my eyes. In my past life, I could have understood her hostility, but in this one, I wasn't even competing with her. Why so much hatred? Because of the large number of students wanting to visit Ethan, they split into small groups. When it was my turn, I saw Emily by his bedside. She looked caring, and Ethan spoke to her in a gentle voice. I wasn't interested, so I simply placed the fruit I had brought on the table and stepped aside, burying myself in my phone. Ethan scoffed when he noticed me but quickly turned back to Emily, raising his voice on purpose. Emily, after this accident, I've realized so much. You're so kind and considerate. Emily interrupted him, pretending to be flustered. Ethan, don't say that. I already understand. But we still have our senior year ahead of us. Ethan had never been this impulsive before. Looking at him now, his face covered in bandages, and he was already confessing his feelings? I smirked and quipped. Emily, you're not rejecting him because of his burns, are you? What nonsense are you talking about? She flared up. Then why don't you just say yes? You seem to agree, but you're still stalling. Don't you enjoy stringing people along? Shut up, Rachel. Ethan snapped. Don't think this will make me notice you. Emily isn't like you. I rolled my eyes. Where did he get the idea that I still had feelings for him? With contempt, I shot back. Look at yourself in the mirror before making such statements. Ethan tensed, gripping his bedsheet. Emily immediately intervened. Rachel, how can you be so cruel? Did you turn away from him just because of his appearance? All right, Ethan, she continued with an air of self-sacrificing virtue. I accept your feelings. I was just afraid it would hurt you. And Rachel, since you two grew up together. Ethan hurried to reassure her. I never loved her. She was the one clinging to me. I sarcastically clapped my hands. A perfect pair. A jerk and a hypocrite. Congratulations. Hope you don't ruin anyone else's life. Their faces twisted with anger. Without waiting for a response, I walked out into the hallway, heading for the restroom. When I returned, Ethan was alone in the room. I picked up my phone, ready to leave, but he suddenly spoke. Since you're not competing, why don't you give your song to Emily? I froze and slowly turned to him. Ethan, even with your disfigured face, you still have the audacity to demand this from me? If you give her the song, he continued, ignoring my tone, I'll forget that you didn't save me from the fire. In fact, I'll still marry you. I laughed at the absurdity of his words. Marry you? I already died once because of you. Wasn't that enough? Do you think I'd want to go through that hell again? I was seething with rage. Looking at him, all I felt was irritation. Why hadn't the fire rid the world of him? If you don't love me, then why did you call the firefighters? He pressed on. Rachel, this is your last chance. You might regret it later. For a second, I considered throwing something at him but decided I didn't want to pay for damages. Instead, I coldly said, you disgust me. Stop being so full of yourself. Calling the firefighters doesn't mean having feelings. Maybe you should see a psychologist. With that, I walked out, afraid that if I stayed any longer, my IQ would drop. The day of the competition arrived quickly. Lisa was fuming over my unfair disqualification, especially when Emily's turn came. The principal is pathetic, she muttered. He's afraid of tarnishing his daughter's reputation, so he kicked you out of the competition. If you were competing, no one else would stand a chance. Emily appeared on stage, dressed in a white gown, radiating confidence. Good evening, esteemed teachers, she said in a sugary voice.
I'll be performing an original song. She paused, glancing smugly in my direction. The audience buzzed with admiration as Emily performed under the dazzling lights. Her song introduced as an original work. Many teachers were visibly impressed, marveling at her supposed talent. But the song she sang was mine. She hadn't even bothered to change the title. Rachel, why is she singing your song? Did you give your composition to Ethan? Lisa stared at me in disbelief, clearly waiting for an explanation. I couldn't exactly explain that Ethan also retained memories from our past lives. Back then, this song had become a nationwide sensation, especially as Emily's debut hit. How could Ethan possibly have forgotten? Emily had finished her performance on stage, holding her head high, clearly waiting for the judges' praise. However, one of the judges spoke in a serious tone. Emily, your singing skills are indeed impressive, but are you sure this song is your original work? I tugged on Lisa's sleeve, signaling for her to calm down and focus on the stage. Don't worry, I whispered. I've got this under control. Emily froze for a moment, panic flashing in her eyes before quickly composing herself. Teacher, did someone say something to you to make you doubt me? I can assure you this is my original composition. No one has ever performed it before. The judge sighed heavily, his expression unwavering. If that's the case, then why was this exact song submitted to me a month ago? The submission even included detailed notes on its creative process. Emily clearly hadn't anticipated this twist. Her face went pale as whispers rippled through the audience. Suspicious and disbelieving glances were cast in her direction. Tears welled up in her eyes. But the judge merely shook his head. Forget it, the judge said finally. At your age, it's normal to be vain. Step down for now. As for the student who submitted this song, I believe they're also from this school. Why not come forward and showcase your talent? The principal quickly jumped in, laughing nervously. That's impossible. A song praised so highly by the judges couldn't have been written by one of our students. My daughter probably found it online. Ignoring the principal's attempt to cover for Emily, I stood up from the crowd, raised my hand, and walked onto the stage. Dressed simply in my school uniform, I carried myself with poise and confidence, a stark contrast to Emily's overly polished demeanor. The judges smiled kindly as they asked me a few questions, all of which were related to the email exchanges I had previously had with them. I answered each one smoothly. Emily stood below the stage, her face ashen, her earlier smugness completely replaced by despair. Just like in my previous life, the competition garnered widespread attention, and my song became a nationwide hit. But this time, I wasn't just the composer, I was also the performer. The recognition earned me a special admission to a prestigious music school. The same judge who had exposed Emily's plagiarism later became my mentor. As for Emily, she was publicly called out for plagiarism and shamelessly claiming the song as her own. Ridiculed by everyone, she eventually left for another country, supposedly to avoid the spotlight. Ethan's situation wasn't much better. From what my parents told me, he was ostracized at school. Even the girlfriend he had started dating in high school broke up with him, citing his disgraceful reputation. Lately, he had been lurking around my house, trying to approach me. Avoiding him was a temporary solution at best, and today was proof of that. Ethan grabbed my wrist tightly, his eyes red as he demanded, "Why didn't you save me this time? Why aren't you following me anymore? Don't you love me anymore?" I couldn't help but roll my eyes at his theatrics. Pulling my hand away, I replied coldly, "Ethan, in my last life, I died because of you. What makes you think I still like you? Do you think I'd willingly set myself up to die for you again?" "No, I didn't know," he said desperately. "I really didn't know. If I had known, I wouldn't have let you die. Does it matter? I still died in the end, didn't I?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "Ethan, have you fallen in love with me? How pathetic can you get?" My words seemed to stab him straight in the heart. His face crumbled, and his eyes filled with a hollow sadness. "I'll prove myself to you," he muttered before walking away. I didn't see Ethan again after that, though I heard rumors. Apparently, he had started a company, using his memories from our past lives to quickly establish himself as a rising star in the business world. Despite everything, he still maintained an on-and-off relationship with Emily. It was said that Ethan spared no expense to build a team to support her, pouring in huge amounts of money to elevate her career. As Lisa stuffed a piece of watermelon into her mouth, she sneered, "With that team of his, anyone who isn't mute could become famous. These two are seriously annoying. Back in school, they wouldn't stop giving me trouble, and now they're still at it. That endorsement deal they're fighting over? It doesn't even fit Emily's image at all, yet she insists on butting in." I took a bite of watermelon, joining Lisa's rant. "What can we do? Ethan's willing to spend money on her." Just as I spoke, Emily sashayed over toward us, exuding fake elegance. She looked at me like I was beneath her. "Rachel, even if you won back then, what does it matter? This endorsement is still mine now. Oh, and I should thank you. If you hadn't given up on Ethan, we wouldn't be together." I stood up, my height making me tower over her by half a head. Looking down at her, I smirked. "If Ethan loves you so much, why didn't he help clear up all the gossip about you? With his resources, that would have been easy. Over the past few years, I built up my own strength. While I wasn't powerful enough to fully challenge them, I had enough to hold my ground. No matter how much money Ethan poured into Emily, I still outshined her. My new songs and albums were constantly compared to hers online, with me coming out on top every time. Even the incidents from our school days had resurfaced, with public opinion overwhelmingly in my favor. Emily, on the other hand, leaned into her infamy, thriving on a controversial love-to-hate image. "You don't get it," Emily snapped, her face cold but her voice clearly flustered. "Ethan's doing this on purpose. Controversy drives traffic. You wouldn't understand." "Sure," I replied dryly. "If you're happy being publicly hated, then by all means, enjoy it." Emily glared daggers at me. "Rachel, laugh while you can. Just watch. I'll whine to Ethan, and he'll take away every opportunity you have right now." Feigning mock fear, I clasped my hands to my chest and said sarcastically, "Oh no, you're so considerate. taking on my workload while I'm too busy to handle it. Then, with a dramatic wave of my hands, I grabbed Lisa and walked away before she could respond. The next morning, Lisa came running to me, breathless. "Rachel, all your endorsements and shows, they've all been replaced with Emily." Before I could even react, social media had exploded. My accounts were flooded with angry comments calling me talentless and questioning why I was hogging so many resources. "Get lost. We want our Rachel back. Trash Emily. Leave our queen alone. Get this copycat off our screens." Emily didn't help matters. She posted a smug caption. "I said I wanted them, and he gave them to me." Attached was a photo of her holding hands with Ethan. But the response she received wasn't what she expected. Her post was met with an endless barrage of ellipses, followed by relentless mockery and criticism of both her and Ethan. Lisa shook her head, exasperated. What are they even doing? Are they that desperate for public humiliation? I sighed. It's baffling. They're practically inviting the backlash. To calm my fans, I posted a statement assuring them I was using this break to focus on creating new music, which I would debut at an upcoming international competition. The response was overwhelming, with fans pouring out support and even attracting new followers. My fanbase grew significantly overnight, but my unease lingered. Ethan was a businessman, and he wouldn't normally make moves that hurt his own interests. This felt like a setup for something bigger. Soon enough, I discovered he'd been quietly trying to reach out to me through intermediaries, likely trying to lure me out. Then, as I hurried home one evening, I heard his voice behind me. "Rachel, wait for me." My heart sank, and I quickened my pace, determined not to fall into whatever trap he was setting this time. "Can we find a place to talk about what happened before?" Ethan asked, his voice muffled behind a mask, leaving only his eyes visible. For a brief moment, I thought I saw vulnerability in them, but I must have been mistaken. "There's nothing to talk about between us," I replied coldly, turning to leave. Before I could take a step, Ethan grabbed my wrist. I immediately yanked it away like it burned me. "Don't touch me," I snapped. "Don't you have your beloved Emily now? After all, you've been stealing my opportunities for her. So why are you bothering me?" The flicker of weakness in Ethan disappeared in an instant, replaced by his usual overbearing demeanor. "Rachel, why can't you just listen to me? Why does it have to come to this?" I rolled my eyes, his words implying that I was being unreasonable. Pretending to call for security, I waved toward an imaginary figure. Seeing this, Ethan reluctantly let go of my wrist. "Rachel," he said, his voice softer now, "I miss you. You'll understand everything soon enough." His words made me wary. To avoid any unnecessary complications, I decided to minimize going out, limiting any chance Ethan might have to approach me again. Meanwhile, Emily had been unusually active lately, appearing frequently on various reality shows to maintain her visibility. To my surprise, she even entered the same international music competition as me. She publicly addressed me on social media, claiming that the incidents back in school were due to her immaturity. She boldly declared that this time, she would rely on her talent to surpass me. Her post, however, was flooded with ridicule from netizens. Comments like, "There goes the queen of drama again. And your so-called talent? How about Ethan's expensive team backing you up?" filled her page. Many pointed out that anyone with a decent team could make it big, but she foolishly chose to compete against someone with real talent. The day of the competition finally arrived. I was extremely cautious, bringing my own water and avoiding anything prepared by others, wary of any underhanded tricks Ethan or Emily might pull. As I got into the vehicle provided by the organizers to head to the venue, my phone buzzed with frantic messages from Lisa. "Where are you? The organizers said they never picked you up. Where did you go?" My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. I immediately shared my live location with Lisa and told her to contact the police. Hopefully, this is just a misunderstanding, I thought, and not what I fear. I glanced at the driver, trying to appear casual. When I looked up, my eyes met his in the rearview mirror. His gaze was cold and devoid of any emotion. Then he spoke, his tone chilling. "It's no use. The police won't make it in time." My breath hitched as the car suddenly accelerated, heading toward the outskirts of the city. A white mist began streaming from the air vents, and I quickly covered my nose and mouth, but it was no use. My consciousness started slipping away. Before I blacked out, I heard the driver let out a heavy sigh. Blame your bad luck. If you don't die, my daughter won't live. When I woke up, I was tied up in an abandoned factory. My phone was gone, and the sight of the place sent a shiver down my spine. This was the same place where, in my past life, I had been brutally beaten to death by 2 kidnappers. The fear surged through me, making me tremble uncontrollably. Please don't kill me, I begged the man in front of me. My parents are waiting for me at home. I can't die. I still have friends in this life. Please, I'm begging you, don't kill me. But the man's expression remained cold. No, Rachel, he sneered. You were pretty smug when I was being cancelled online, weren't you? Bet you never thought you'd end up like this. From the shadows, I suddenly heard a mocking laugh. It was a familiar voice that made my blood run cold. Rachel, look at you now. So pathetic. Emily, I gasped. This is kidnapping. It's illegal. You're a public figure. You'll ruin yourself. Aren't you afraid of being caught? I asked, my voice trembling. Emily sneered, her expression full of disdain. Do you really think anyone will notice if you die? Rachel, no one will find you. I felt a wave of panic. I've never done anything to you. Why do you hate me so much? You want to win the international competition? Fine. I won't participate. The championship will be yours. You don't need to kill me. Emily laughed loudly, as if I had just told the funniest joke. Nothing against me? Rachel, do you know how much cyberbullying I've endured because of you? Why is it that you don't have to do anything, and you're still the top in vocals? Why does Ethan love you no matter what? Do you know he could easily suppress all the bad press about me, but instead, he lets it spread everywhere? Because he's paving the way for you. He's even prepared all kinds of evidence to destroy me completely today, just so you can stay perfect and untarnished in everyone's eyes. Her voice grew shrill, her words tumbling out like a dam breaking. All I did was reject him once, just because his face was scarred and disfigured. And for that, he wants to ruin me? This whole kidnapping was his idea. He ordered that no harm should come to you, but he never expected me to tweak his plan a little. Rachel, enjoy your last moments. After you're gone, I'll send the videos of your torture to your parents and Lisa. Let them see what happens when they cross me. The empty factory fell silent again, save for my ragged breathing and the heavy presence of the kidnapper. Fear surged through me as I shrank back. Don't kill me. Whatever Emily paid you, I can pay double. Please, don't kill me. My parents are waiting for me at home. I sobbed, desperate. Or at least give me a moment to write a goodbye letter. The kidnapper stepped closer, gripping a bat tightly. His expression remained cold. Fine. You have 10 minutes to say your goodbyes. If someone comes to save you in that time, it means you're not meant to die. 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like an eternity and a blink at the same time. The kidnapper sighed deeply, raising the bat. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I have to save my daughter. I'll try to make it as painless as possible. I clenched my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. Just as I thought my life was over, a loud bang echoed through the factory as the door was smashed open. The kidnapper froze, turning toward the sound. In the next moment, several police officers stormed in, tackling him to the ground and securing him. One figure rushed to my side, frantically untying the ropes and checking me for injuries. His hands trembled as he spoke. Rachel, you're alive. This time, I finally saved you. I looked at him, stunned. Lisa, I asked, confused by his words. My mind reeled. What does he mean? This time, could it be? He had also been reborn? Fragments of memories flashed through my mind. In my last life, before I died, I had desperately called Lisa for help. I had been deaf, unable to hear what he said on the other end of the line, pouring out everything I regretted, about saving Ethan, about everything. Could it be that Lisa had heard me and tried to save me then, but I hadn't held on long enough? Tears welled up in my eyes as the realization hit me. In my previous life, I hadn't been as alone as I thought. Lisa panicked at the sight of my tears. Rachel, don't cry, he pleaded. But his own tears soon followed. In the end, We were both sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to each other. Rachel, what would I do if something happened to you? Lisa wailed. What about your parents? I can't take care of two families on my own. It's okay, I said between sobs. I don't want anything to happen to me either. I just want to live. But who could have guessed those two idiots, Ethan and Emily, would drag me into their mess? The police escorted the kidnapper out and asked us to return to the station to give statements. Wiping my tears, I quietly told the officers, I think the kidnapper was forced into this because his daughter was being threatened. He didn't want to do it. Can you save his daughter? I asked the police, still wiping away tears. Lisa, who was also teary-eyed, suddenly froze. Wait, Rachel, he exclaimed. Today's the day of the international competition. We can't let that little snake, Emily, win so easily. He turned to the officers urgently. Officers, we know where the mastermind is. Rachel, let's head back immediately. Even if Ethan is about to go to jail, letting Emily win would hurt more than anything else. Without wasting any time, we jumped into a police car, its sirens blaring, as we sped toward the competition venue. Meanwhile, 10 minutes before her performance, Emily was smoothing out her elegant dress as she made her way to Ethan. He was visibly agitated, frequently checking his phone, as though waiting for a call from someone. Emily's lips curved into a sly smile as she slowly leaned closer to him. However, when she caught a glimpse of the uneven scars beneath his mask, she quickly suppressed her disgust. Ethan, I never rejected you because of your scars. I love you, she said softly, feigning sincerity. Why are you so focused on Rachel now? Have you forgotten that she didn't save you when you needed her most? Ethan's expression darkened, his frustration barely contained. Who gave you the right to talk about her like that? He snapped. Startled, Emily's breath hitched as she took a step back. Just then, someone from backstage reminded her that it was almost time for her to go on stage. Before leaving, she leaned close to Ethan and whispered in his ear, She's in my hands now. There's no way she can call you. If you want to know where she is, let my performance go smoothly. Otherwise, I can't guarantee she'll come out of this unharmed. Ethan's eyes widened in shock, and his pupils shrank. He immediately contacted his team, ordering them to cancel their original plans and focus on finding me. Emily's performance went off without a hitch. It was, admittedly, impressive, and had I not shown up, she likely would have taken the trophy. But I was the last to perform, the highlight of the event. As my time approached, the host called out, Ms. Rachel, is Ms. Rachel here? If not, we will have to assume she is withdrawing from the competition. The audience erupted into murmurs, and social media buzzed with speculation. Some claimed I was too scared to compete, while others guessed that something unfortunate might have happened to me. My parents, watching from home, frantically texted me, worried about my safety. I quickly replied, assuring them that there had just been a small delay. On stage, Emily's victorious smile spread wider, as though she could already feel the weight of the trophy in her hands. But just then, the sound of police sirens blared from outside, growing louder by the second. The audience stirred, whispering curiously. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic as the doors to the venue swung open, and I walked in. My clothes were torn, and I was bruised, but I strode confidently toward the stage. Emily's smile froze, and Ethan's eyes lit up with relief. I grabbed the microphone and addressed the crowd. Apologies, everyone. I ran into a little kidnapping on my way here. What can I say? When you're as talented as I am, jealousy tends to follow you everywhere. The audience chuckled, and the tension in the room eased. Smiling, I continued. Today, I'll be performing an original song titled Life. It's about finding hope even in the darkest times. No matter how difficult things may seem, life always offers a sliver of light. You just have to take the time to see it. Don't let yourself be trapped in suffering, I said, my voice calm yet resolute. In my past life, I was stuck in self-pity, ashamed of my hearing loss, too scared to face the world, and allowed Ethan to manipulate me. I hated the world for being so unfair. But the truth was, the wrongdoer wasn't me. It was Ethan and people like him who didn't deserve the privileges they took for granted. I took a deep breath, my voice steady as I addressed the crowd. In my last life, my parents may have passed away, but I always had friendships. If only I had reached out, I wouldn't have been alone. Today, I want to share that sentiment with all of you. The sincerity of my words moved the audience, and as I finished my performance, thunderous applause filled the venue. Winning the championship was no longer in question. Meanwhile, Emily was being escorted away by the police. Her screams echoed through the hall. "Rachel, I hate you. Every single time I'm about to succeed, you show up and ruin it. Why don't you just die? Why do you always destroy my future?" Just as her angry words filled the room, the large screen on stage began playing incriminating footage. It revealed the truth about Emily's past, how she initially used her body to gain resources, later fell into drug addiction, and ultimately lured innocent young girls into substance abuse before exploiting them. "No, don't look. That's not me," Emily screamed hysterically, trying to block the screen. But her efforts were futile. Turning her anger toward Ethan, she shrieked, "Ethan, who gave you the right to play the good guy now? The money you used to start your company came from me. And those songs in high school, those were Rachel's. And you gave them to me. What right do you have to act righteous now?" Her breakdown continued as she accused him of orchestrating the kidnapping and claimed she merely tweaked the plan. Her words only cemented the evidence against her. The police arrested Emily on the spot, and Ethan was also taken in for questioning. Despite everything, Ethan walked toward me, his eyes red with regret. Lisa immediately stepped in to shield me. "Rachel," Ethan pleaded, "can we talk? Just for a moment." His once proud demeanor had crumbled, and he looked older, almost pitiful. "I didn't know Emily would go that far," he said, his voice trembling. "I only wanted to prove to you that this life could be different. If you were kidnapped, I would have saved you without hesitation. I'm sorry, Rachel. I shouldn't have doubted you in our past life, or fought with you in this one. I regret it so much." I cut him off coldly. "Ethan, you don't love me. At the start of this life, you wanted to be with Emily. Only after you were disfigured did you see her disdain for you, and when life became difficult, you started thinking about me. That's not love. It's selfishness." "No, that's not true." Ethan shook his head desperately. "After you died in our past life, I regretted everything. And yet, as soon as you were reborn, you ran straight back to Emily." I interrupted. Ethan seemed to lose all his strength, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Rachel, what can I do to make you forgive me? I don't want to see you ever again," I said firmly. "Nothing good ever happens when you're around." Emily's crimes, now fully exposed, earned her the death penalty. Ethan, implicated in her schemes and confessing to using illicit funds to start his company, was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Before his incarceration, he sent me a letter through an intermediary. I didn't bother reading it and threw it straight into the trash. After everything he'd done, his so-called apologies would only insult me further. The kidnapper's daughter was rescued safely, and he received a 2-year sentence. As he was being taken away, he and his daughter broke down in tears, kneeling before me in gratitude. The sight startled me so much I nearly knelt in return out of instinct. Later, Lisa scolded me. "Rachel, you're way too soft-hearted. How can you not hold a grudge against someone who almost killed you?" Grinning, I threw myself into his arms playfully. "But everything's fine now, isn't it? Besides, if he hadn't gone easy on me, I might not have survived. By the way, are you coming over for dinner tonight? My mom said she's throwing a party to celebrate my championship win." Lisa laughed and agreed. For the first time in this life, I felt a sense of peace. My parents were alive. Lisa was by my side, and I was free to express my emotions. Unlike my past life, I was no longer alone.